Well, hello and welcome along to the Andrew Eborn Show, where news has just come in that sadly Hilton Valentine, the lead guitarist of The Animals, has died, age 77. And to talk about Hilton and also The Animals, I'm joined by Mike Read. How are you doing, Mike?
Fine. You just told me 2 seconds ago. So, yeah, I mean, these things are often sprung upon you. You often get a phone call from TV saying, "Oh, could you talk about so-and-so?" When? Now? Okay. You're trying to dredge everything you can. I mean, yeah, the Animals, obviously from the northeast of England, from Newcastle, and Eric Burdon, very feisty lead singer. Alan Price, of course, initially for quite a long time on keyboards. John Steele on drums. Hilton Valentine on guitar, and Big Chess Chandler on bass, who of course went on to discover Jimi Hendrix. So they all did a lot in their own way. They weren't just a band. They spread out and did their own thing. I think John is still running the Animals with different people up front and what have you. But yeah, Hilton Valentine, great lead guitarist. I mean, how many guitarists now go into shops, say, "Can I try the guitar?" And what do? Dong ding 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 dong ding 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 ding. House of the Rising Sun. Wow. I know Alan Price arranged it, but you've got Hilton Valentine, their lead guitarist, who is amazing. And of course, when House of the Rising Sun came out, everybody said, "Oh, well, that won't be a hit," because Mickey Most produced it. They said that won't be a hit. It's 4 minutes long. Nobody plays songs that are 4 minutes long. But of course, they proved everybody wrong, and it became an absolute monster. They did some other, so many good songs. I'm Crying was one of my favorites. I love that. Baby, Let Me Take You Home. There's some cracking songs.
Yeah, and we've got to get out of this place, all these sort of glorious things. House of the Rising Sun was my go-to when we used to do karaoke. I used to help pioneer when they first brought karaoke to this country in the 90s. And I remember there was a whole contingent of Japanese who came over, having invented karaoke in a little bar in the 1970s. They brought it over to England, and all the Japanese came over and saw a karaoke night in London. And I can tell you it's very different to a karaoke night in Ginza, where they're very respectful and clap very quietly. And the whole crowds erupt in London, singing along to normally Grease songs. But I could get away with House of the Rising Sun. That was my go-to song.
Yeah, I was in an Indian restaurant a while ago, and I had a really lovely vindaloo, and the waiter came over and he said, "Mr. Read, karaoke?" And I said, "All right, just one song."
What would you sing on a karaoke?
What would I sing? Well, the problem with they got me to host a karaoke TV series once because it was live and the host dropped out. They couldn't whack it and handle it. So I drove down to, I think it was Porthcawl. I did this whole TV series on karaoke. And they said, "Well, you could do one a week as well." But of course, what the person doesn't know that's pushing the button is what key it's in. So that's a major thing. If you're in a sopranos key and it's suddenly you think you're going to be Johnny Cash, oh, suddenly you're up there. So the key is a major thing. So many people know a song, they get on stage, and on comes a song and think, "I can't sing that. It's much too high or it's much too low." So that's always a problem. But House of the Rising Sun had its roots really in a sort of Dublin song, St. James Infirmary, which is a separate song, but they were of the same family. It's like all being begat by Adam and Eve. St. James Infirmary sort of gave that sequence, that chord sequence, to House of the Rising Sun. So that's where the roots of it came from. And it was, the roots of all these things are quite earthy and quite gutsy. But that's where the whole thing came from. And Graham Gouldman, one of our eminent songwriters, said that his very first hit, For Your Love, the Yardbirds, he was so inspired by the House of the Rising Sun that he thought he'd nick the chords. But he thought, well, I can't nick all of them. So that ding, ding, instead of what he did, hang on, I've got the guitar here, I can show you. What he did, House of the Rising Sun goes, that's how it goes. And he thought, I can't nick them all. So he went. So he stayed on the same chord rather than going up to the B flat. He thought, I'll nick a bit of it, but I won't nick all of it.
Yeah, very good. And 1994, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Animals finally. It took a few years for them to get inducted. Why do you think that was?
Well, it's the same with everyone. The Zombies were only inducted, I think, last year before. So It depends who else is there. It's like asking why someone hasn't got to number one. There are so many other good songs around at the time. You think, well, maybe that's why. But Hilton Valentine, I remember as a kid thinking that it was a terrific name. I mean, the British had ordinary names. The Americans had terrific names. When you look at the end credits, Sammy Schnubenheimer III, and we don't have names like that. So Hilton Valentine was a very unusual name, I think, for a British guy. And I thought, that's a great name, Hilton Valentine. It just rolls off the tongue. He should be a pop star with a name like that.
Absolutely. And I'm sure when he was born in 1943 in Northumberland, Hilton Valentines, there weren't many of those around.
No, very few Hilton Valentines. There were lots of people with similar names, and very unusual then, because that post-war thing, so many boys were called David, Richard, Edward, Michael, John, Peter. There were solid English names that people wanted to get back to, I guess, post World War II. But Hilton, there weren't very many Hiltons. Maybe it was a family name, I don't know.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Well, he moved to California in his last few years, and enjoyed working on various other albums himself over there. Is it very difficult when people leave a major group and go off and start on their own?
Well, the Animals really, technically folded a long time ago. Eric Burdon then formed Eric Burdon and the Animals, did wonderful songs like Sky Pilot, one of my all-time favorites. And Eric Burdon rather brilliantly got into the whole psychedelic thing. Good Times, San Franciscan Nights. Oh, I must make a note to play that. He sort of went off. He became hippie. And I remember in one interview, somebody said, so Eric, what are you doing these days? He said, I'm a student, man. Oh, you're going back to college? No, I'm a student of life. I thought, great. How cool. I'm a student of life. Aren't we all? Brilliant. Yeah, a lot of people end up going to the States, maybe made a bit with the band. And I think, well, sometimes in the States, they regard their heroes, their musical heroes, their artistic heroes, their celluloid heroes as people to be inspired by. But over here, sometimes it's like, oh, were you in that band? Oh, what are you doing now then? Are you in the Where Are They Now file? So sometimes we can be a bit like that over here. And I can understand. I mean, I remember Peter Noon saying to me why he went to America age 16 or 17. I think, because he became a millionaire through Herman's Hermits very, very young, exactly the same time as the Animals. They all came through at the same time. And he said, well, I went to America because, I wanted to be able to live in the same road as Smokey Robinson or Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder. He said, and I could. That's why I went. So I could say, hey, I'm living in this avenue along with all these big stars, which is quite honest, very funny.
No, love it. And did they enjoy the Animals? Did they enjoy success around the world? Because sometimes you just get these British acts who enjoy success at home and they don't break it abroad. How did they do, the Animals?
I don't know exactly. I mean, obviously, House of the Rising Sun was a hit all around the world. Some were, some weren't. I don't know. I haven't studied their global chart career, but they've done pretty well. I think it must have done reasonably well in the States. Because Eric Burdon embraced that whole San Franciscan culture. Alan Price, of course, did very well. He left early and was replaced by Dave Robery. But he went off and had a solo career, lots of hits, then teamed up with Georgie Fame to have a lot of hits. Wrote a lot of themes as well. He was good on TV themes, film themes. Wrote the Jarrow song, which was brilliant. He was the one that, interestingly, people didn't realize at the time about songwriting, really, in those early days. He did the arrangement of House of the Rising Sun. And if it's a song out of copyright and you do an arrangement, it becomes your copyright. That arrangement becomes your copyright. So Alan Price actually made all the money out of House of the Rising Sun because technically it's his song. He did the arrangement. So every time it's played, he makes money from it. And he left the group because he didn't want to fly. He wasn't keen on flying. And a lot of people are like that. So he didn't want to fly, so that's why he left the group. But he's a very talented guy, but I bump into Alan sometimes, and he is the driest guy and a man of few words. I've been watching, what's the Dylan TV program? Was it Don't Look Back? I think it's called Don't Look Back. Yeah. And in it, Alan was in it, and in it, Dylan had said to Alan Price, hey, this English guy, Donovan, he said, what's he like, this guy? Is he any good? Is he like me? And Alan Price never minced his words. He just turned to Dylan. He said, "He's better than you, and that's for sure." Where people would have been sort of polite or, diplomatic, maybe at best, but he's better than you, and that's for sure. No, I was sitting outside. Alan lives in Barnes. I was sitting outside Cafe de Lys with a friend, and Alan walked past. I always say hi. "Oh, hello, man. How you doing?" "Yeah, great. We never stopped for a long chat because he's a man of few words. He was walking along, and I said, "Hi, Alan." He said, "Hello, mate. How you doing?" Carried on walking. Didn't break stride. I'd just been watching this thing, so I just said, "He's better than you, and that's for sure." And without breaking stride, he said, "You've been watching Don't Look Back." And he didn't even look back when he said it, which is hilarious.
I'm talking about Don't Look Back. I mean, Oasis, 25 years, that's flown by as well, hasn't it? Time in music seems to just fly really, really quickly, because you remember when all these wonderful songs come out, and time and events just seem to speed up nowadays, don't they?
Yeah, they do. When you consider the most popular bands still in terms of memorabilia, merchandising, and indeed radio play, the Beatles, so phenomenally popular. And here we are in 2020, 2021. They broke up 50 years ago. 50 years ago they broke up. Now, would we in 1970, would we still have been, raving about some band that broke up in 1920? No, we would. 1920, just after the First World War, would they still be the top band of all time, still really popular? 50 years earlier, in 1920, in 1970, when everyone was cool and hip, and of course not. I mean, so that's where it telescopes. It's really amazing. I mean, if somebody says, "Oh, this song's from 2000," people think, "Well, that's relatively recent." But if you played a song in 1980 from 1960, it would seem quite a long time ago.
Yeah, no, you're right. And so nowadays, I mean, if you're thinking about those big artists, we talk about the Animals from all those years ago, from the 60s and things like that, and we still remember those. Who do you think are going to be the survivors today of the bands?
No idea. Absolutely no idea. And I don't think anybody has either. I don't think you can tell who is going to survive. Certainly, I think groups that had just a few hits in the 60s thought maybe they wouldn't survive, or even just one hit. But so many of them are still out there and playing and trading off the back of 1, 2, or 3 hits. And people go to hear those hits because it reminds them of their youth, a different period, different time, different era. It makes them feel young again. So, yeah, a lot of those groups are still out there and still playing. Do you know, I often get asked, by people that go, "Oh, so-and-so, are they still going? I bet they're rubbish now," assuming they've gone downhill. And I said, I think you'll find their playing was more rubbish when they started, to which they would attest. And they've got better over time because they've been doing, 100, 200 nights a year, gigging and working and playing. So they've actually got better as musicians. I think they would all agree in the early days, it was like, okay, 3 chords, 4 chords, what do we play? Getting away with it, get some session guys in. And, but I said they've just got better over the years. The assumption is that people get worse. Maybe voices can get worse. But instrumentation and the playing of instruments, I think, can only get better.
Sure. And that's the other thing as well. Lots of bands reinvent themselves. You get the name. I mean, the Animals had many different members along the years, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look on Wikipedia now at a band, you say original members, and it says later members, current members. And with some bands, The Fall, I mean, you could be counting all day. I mean, there are hundreds of them. So, yeah. So often people say, "Oh, I played with so-and-so." Did you? Well, they might have done for a year or 2 years. So, I mean, some bands now, they credit, 30 members somewhere along the way. I think one of the problems is that those members then split off and do their own thing. And there were one member that says so-and-so, so-and-so, formerly of so-and-so. And you think, yeah, but you're one of 30 or 40 people that were formerly of so-and-so. So it's the family tree has got like the Nile Delta.
Right. And it's also like that's a philosopher's question, isn't it? If you keep replacing the whole body with something else, when do you eventually lose the soul of it, I guess?
Oh, yeah, there are quite a few 60s bands out there now, that have got the name and are playing the songs, and indeed from the States as well. I mean, when you go and see the Four Tops, it's not the original Four Tops, not because, it's not fair, it's because they're just not around anymore. And they started in the early 50s. So of course it's not going to be the original Four Tops, but people go to
Odyssey as well with Stephen, the son of, So Odyssey is still going, but next generation can get down. You also have the people where they have a bit of conflict, don't you? You have two members of the same band who split off and do their own thing. So we have all sorts of examples of that. Boney M, there's two lots of those, and different ones on the road. And it can get a bit confusing for the public, can't it?
Yeah, it can. The most famous one of that is the Drifters. Well, there have been several drifters going out there, and people go and say, "Oh no, they're not the real drifters. We're the real drifters." So it's very difficult to know who owns what. I think there were different platters. I think Buck Ram owned the original platters, and then which line do you follow? I mean, do you follow the male line or the distaff line? Which is what it is really. Which is the true line? I mean, it's in terms of monarchy as well. Which is a true line? Should the sons of John of Gaunt been on the throne? So it's you just got to. I think you just got to accept it. Go along, enjoy the night. If you don't like it, don't go and see them again. If you do go and see them again.
Fantastic. Well, I certainly have many fond memories of surviving a karaoke night doing a murdering House of the Rising Sun. So Hilton Valentine, we remember him well. Delighted that The Price is Right and Alan's getting all that money from his arrangement. So always a thrill. Mike Read, thank you very much for joining me, remembering Hilton Valentine, who passed away today, aged 77. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye-bye.